Okay.
Hello, Mike. How are you? Sounded like someone was coming up.
Strength.
Well, welcome everyone. We'll begin. Maybe they'll come up, maybe they won't. Tonight's talk is on the Kulavadala Sutta, which is it's a wonderful sutta where a nun teaches her ex-husband, both part of the Sangha, the Buddha Sangha. She teaches him the Dhamma. And it's an interesting sutta for a lot of reasons, and I'll get into it right after we meditate. But we'll meditate first for 20 minutes. So find your relaxed meditative posture and gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And holding your back straight, but not stiff. Your ears aligned with your shoulders, nose aligned with your navel. And holding yourself very loosely, very gently, very lovingly. Hold on 1 second. We'll start again. Please come in. Are you new? I can't.
I was here maybe a week ago, but my second time.
What's your name?
Ali.
Ali. Welcome. That's okay. I'm glad you made it. We'll start again. It sounds like someone else is coming up too. So people get in. Good evening. Your name? My eyes are, it's not that I don't remember you. I remember you. My eyes just aren't that good. So it's nice to see you again. Good evening. And you are?
Emily.
Emily, welcome to our Sangha. I know this is your first time.
Yes.
My
sister.
Hi. Mike, could you move a little bit that way?
One of those?
No, just to slide over a little bit so I can see Emily. I try to stagger these, but a little bit more. Emily, do you have a meditation practice now? No. Okay, so I'll talk you into it. The meditation method I teach is called Shamatha-Vipassana meditation. Those are ancient words. Shamatha simply means to quiet the mind by being mindful of your breath and to develop a tranquil mind. Shamatha really means tranquil. And Vipassana means to gain insight. And it's a very specific insight into the nature of who we are in relation to the world around us. And I talk about this at different classes. I won't get into the whole explanation of everything. The point that I'm trying to make is that meditation is part of a broader framework. It's not just meditation, and that's what our classes are about. And tonight's talk is about something in relation to that. So I teach something that a human being who awakened and became called the Buddha, I teach what he taught in a very pure and direct way. There's nothing religious about it. There's nothing really even spiritual. It's just very practical teachings on how to live a life of peace and happiness. And meditation is an important part of that. And I hope you continue to join us and you'll learn more about that as we go along. The meditation method is very simple, and I'll just talk you into it to get you started. And then during the class, I'll give you some advice on maintaining a practice. So find your relaxed meditative posture. You're sitting well. The importance of a meditation posture is simply that it be comfortable. So and we can talk about that a little bit later on. Holding your back straight but not stiff. Your ears aligned with your shoulders and nose aligned with your navel. And gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And holding yourself very loosely, very gently, very lovingly. Allow yourselves to settle into this room. Settle onto your seats. Settle into your bodies. And settle into your minds. And take a moment to become aware of the sensation of breathing in your body. Just get a feel for what that's like. To be mindful of your breath in your body. And while remaining mindful of your breath in your body, notice that thoughts are flowing. We're conscious beings. Thoughts should be flowing. The purpose of meditation is to not be distracted by your own thoughts. So when you find that you're caught up in your thinking again, simply acknowledge that and return your mindfulness to the sensation of breathing. I'll repeat that. When you find that you're caught up in your thinking again, simply acknowledge that and return your mindfulness to the sensation of breathing. Relaxing your thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. And we'll meditate for 20 minutes with callbacks every 5 minutes. Relaxing your thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. Relaxing your thoughts, remaining mindful of your breathing. If a persistent thought or feeling arises, stay with it for a moment or two, recognize it as impermanent, and return your mindfulness to the sensation of breathing. And we'll meditate for 5 more minutes. take a moment to notice the quality of your mind. Be at peace with your mind. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. So, I think what I'd like to do is, Emily's new, and Ali and Olivia are relatively new. I think the sutta that I was going to read tonight, not that it's advanced, but I think it'd be hard to keep it in context without having a little bit more background. So I'll teach that in a couple weeks. And just so you know what I'm talking about, everything I teach is something that a gentleman named Siddhartha Gautama, who would become known as the Buddha upon figuring some things out that he called Four Noble Truths. Everything I teach is what he taught. I don't teach anything that is embellished or adapted to fit any type of view. What I teach comes directly from a set of books called the Sutta Pitaka, which is part of the Pali Canon, which are the preserved teachings of this awakened human being. And so the teaching I was going to give tonight, which I'll give in 2 weeks, was one of those suttas. But I think just it'd be a good idea to just review what this is all about. And I think you said, Alan, you don't have any meditation practice at all?
No.
That's good. It's good that you don't, because you don't have any preconceived ideas about what this might be about. And I know I asked Olivia and Al the same question, and you gave very good answers. No, so that's a good thing. And really, the reason why I say that is I spent many years studying in the many of the modern Buddhist schools, particularly the Tibetan and the Zen schools. And the longer that I studied, the more confused I got and the more frustrated I got. And again, I'm not trying to disparage those in any way. This was my experience. And it wasn't until that increasing confusion and frustration that I studied what this gentleman, Siddhartha Gautama, actually taught. And I didn't even know if these teachings were surprising, that you could be involved in Buddhism and never even be directed towards this, or even have it mentioned that, this guy's teachings are still here. But after a little bit of a search, I found them, and it changed everything. And my view went to, this was something I wasn't even aware of at the time, but it went from this notion that I needed to find something to fix something that was wrong with me, realizing that it was the way I was looking at myself in relation to the world was what was wrong with me, and what was creating all the confusion and disappointing experiences that I had up until that time. And it's not that I lived, a terribly hard life. I didn't, but I was always, it always felt like there was something missing. How wonderful it was, and even when things were tough, like it is for everybody, I tended to blame myself and take those things personally, when most of the time those things were completely impersonal. So what I found was this gentleman, Siddhartha Gautama, kind of felt the same way that I did, and I think the way most human beings did. He was born a prince in his father's kingdom, but at a very, very early age. He recounts times when he was 4 and 5 years old, that no matter what he was given, and no matter how wonderful his life was, he was disappointed. It just didn't feel like any of this was really meaningful. And his father really lavished him because he wanted him to stay and be the heir to his throne. So at the age of 29, he kind of escaped. He left the palace grounds for the first time in his life under the cover of darkness. And for the first time in his life, he was exposed to real human life. He walked into the nearest town. He saw a sick person for the first time, and it shocked him. He asked his handler who was with him, "What's wrong with that man?" And he just said, "Well, he's sick. People get sick at times." And he didn't have a frame of reference for even to understand sickness. He walked a little further, and there's a body, a corpse on the side of the road, and it shocked him. He says, "Why is that man sleeping there on the side of the road?" He says, "He's not sleeping. He's dead." "What do you mean he's dead?" He said, his handler's name was Chanda. He said, everybody has to die. And it was a concept that he was never exposed to. He couldn't understand this. He walked into town and he saw the competitiveness and the aggressiveness of the people, much like our society today. Things weren't much different in the Buddha's time and in his environment as they are today. It's just we have a global understanding of the problems that we have. It was immediate to him. And so he decided that this life of luxury that he was living was meaningless. And he left that life and he started traveling around northern India, which was common for men of his age to do, even if they had a family, to seek spiritual understanding. It was an honored thing. The Buddha left his wife and his newborn, Rahula, and he traveled around northern India for 6 years, studying with some of the foremost teachers of his time. And two of them that he studied with, one gentleman's name was Alara Kalama, the other was Udeka Brahmaputta. The only reason why the names are significant is they were the foremost so-called spiritual teachers of his time. He studied their teachings, he mastered them very quickly. He became so adept at understanding these particular advanced teachings that both of these teachers asked Siddhartha to come and join them and be their main teacher. And he somewhat gracefully declined, but he said that your teachings, while they may be wonderful, do not lead to the understanding that he's seeking. And what he was seeking was an understanding of what he saw in the town that first day. The sickness, the aging, the fact that we're all going to die, the competitiveness and aggressiveness of human beings. And what's the point? It seems so meaningless to him if we're all going to end up like that body on the side of the road. So he left those two teachers and he continued wandering around northern India. And along the way, he met 5 other fellows. And as a group, they were practicing these very severe ascetic practices, the understanding at the time. And it's still an understanding today that if you deny the body to an extreme level, that somehow that'll free your mind from your body. The notion sounds a little bit nutty, but it's still practice. And there's examples of that type of asceticism in most spiritual practices. They just don't go to that extreme. So it's even an extreme ascetic practice to do something like meditate for extremely long periods of time. And the really reason I say that is that's even taught in some meditation practices, not something the Buddha taught. Anyway, after 6 years of this study of different practices, trying different meditation techniques, these extreme ascetic practices, the Buddha was walking down the road one day and he was so malnourished from not eating it. It said that he recounts when he was living on a grain of rice or 1 bean a day. He said that he could feel his backbone by touching his belly. That's how emaciated he was. He's walking down the road one day and he passed out. And he rolled down a little hill and into the edge of a river, and he almost drowned. And a young girl, 12 years old, her name was Sujata. She dragged him out of the river and fed him some goat's milk and a little bit of rice and nursed him back to health. And as the Buddha got stronger, he realized what would later become the middle way called the Eightfold Path. He realized that he had been living the extreme life of complete sensory indulgence, being in his father's kingdom, on the palace and on the palace grounds, and he lived the other extreme of extreme sensory and deprivation and denying your own human needs, the two extremes. And he realized that that wasn't the way. He described both of those as painful. And so as he thought a little bit more about his experience, he developed a strong conviction to sit in meditation and consider what he had been doing for the past 6 years and sit there until he awakened, until he understood, until he realized what he was chasing all this time. And so with that strong intention, and right intention is one factor of this thing that I'll describe in a little bit. With a strong intention to sit there and face everything that came up until he awakened, he began a meditation practice. Just prior to that, he remembered something that happened to him when he was 5 years old. He was having a typical day that a 5-year-old would have in a palace. And he was very frustrated and he was getting very angry. And he just told himself, I'm going to sit here under this tree and just be quiet and focus on my breath. Very quickly, young Siddhartha developed a measure of calm and peace. And 30 years later, he remembered that same simple meditation, and that's what he engaged with, and that's what would become Shamatha-Vipassana meditation. So at the age of 35, he sat under a pipal tree, and there's the offspring. Is that the right way when you talk about a tree? The offspring of this tree is still in north. You can still see it in India, in Bodh Gaya. It looks much like a banyan tree. It leaves out these big roots. So the Buddha sat under this pipal tree with a strong intention to meditate until he awakened. And during this meditation session, all of his fears, all of his self-centered views came up. The legend, the myth that's around it is that the malevolent god Mara sent these armies to knock the Buddha off his cushion and scare him away. He sat there steadfast, realizing that this was just all part of his imagination. This was all part of his conditioned thinking. Mara sent his 3 beautiful daughters to tempt the Buddha off his cushion, and he sat there, realizing that this was just part of his conditioned thinking, his self-referential views that he had acquired in his life. Great elephants chased after the Buddha while he's sitting there, and he sat there just like that, just like he's steadfast, realizing these were just fears that were coming up from his own conditioned thinking. And over a period of 40 days, he faced every one of these self-referential views, these views that were rooted in a lack of understanding of the way things truly are. Recognized the impermanence of every one of these things that was coming up in his mind, abandoning them and coming back to the sensation of breathing. Over that period of time, eventually his mind cleared. And again, it's a pretty picture. The legend has it that he opened his eyes and the morning star was arising. And Siddhartha Gautama awakened, and a human being, the human race now had a Buddha in its midst. What he awakened to is something called dependent origination, which simply states that from a basic ignorance of 4 noble truths, all manner of confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing unsatisfactory and disappointing experiences arise. In a word, stress, and in the Pali word, it's called dukkha. So the very first thing the Buddha taught then to these well, let me backtrack a little bit. So the Buddha has awakened. He sat for 2 more weeks considering, is there a way that I can teach this that's going to be useful to other human beings? Because he now understood the common human problem of conditioned thinking, that we as human beings have created a way of looking at the world that is rooted in wrong view. And anything that occurs to us, we try to fit it into that wrong view. When I say conditioned thinking, there's the modern term that's used in psychological and psychiatric circles, and just really therapeutic circles, is confirmation bias, which means that we are biased towards seeing things that will confirm the view that we're holding right now. That's conditioned thinking. So unless we have a way of seeing things clearly, everything that occurs to us, we'll filter through that conditioned thinking, through that conditioned bias. The Buddha realized this 2,600 years ago as a common problem. And he thought, how can I teach this in a way that will get past that common human problem? How can I pierce that veil of conditioned thinking? How can I pierce that veil of ignorance? Because he also understood that a mind that is rooted in ignorance will create infinite numbers of strategies that will allow it to continue to ignore its own ignorance. It's just another way of saying conditioned thinking. And we all do that, don't we? We all think ourselves into corners and don't know how we got there. It's because we don't understand what's really occurring in the world. So the Buddha sat for 2 more weeks thinking, how can I teach this? And he realized that he needed to come up with a framework that people could engage with to recognize their own conditioned thinking, recognize the strategies that they put in place to ignore their own ignorance. And that's where he developed an 8-fold path. And this leads, Emily, to what I was saying, that it's not just meditation that I teach, because it's not just meditation that the Buddha taught. And most people would think that that's just it, that the Buddha was just this great meditator and he just said, go meditate. And that's far from the truth. There are Buddhist schools that teach just meditation, or they're called mind-only schools. But again, it's not something that the Buddha taught, because he understood the problem of conditioned thinking. So one of the things that I've seen about, and this is true for myself too, my own experience, meditation alone, without the proper framework for recognizing what's occurring in your own mind, will often, and almost almost certainly reinforce that conditioned thinking. And it can lead to pretty severe problems. At the very least, you're just using meditation as another distraction in your life. Distraction purposely. The Buddha could nearly as accurately describe the problem as dukkha, in the ongoing suffering, as ongoing distraction. Because it's our preoccupation with stress, with disappointing events, an unsatisfactory nature to life. It's our preoccupation with that distracts us from really engaging in our own life. It's a distraction that allows us to continue to ignore ignorance. So the Buddha taught this eightfold path to recognize and abandon our own ignorance. So let me just describe the Four Noble Truths. The Buddha awakened that ignorance leads to all manner of suffering. So the first noble truth is simply that suffering occurs. It's a natural consequence of having a human life. Diane and I had a nice talk about this this morning, wasn't it? So the Buddha described dukkha, or stress, in this way. He said, birth is painful. He used the word painful after it means stress, means dukkha, means suffering. Sickness is painful. Sickness is suffering. Aging is suffering, and death is suffering. That's true, isn't it? Why is it so important that it took an awakened human being to state the obvious? Because we don't want to face that fact, that we all have a limited time here. Along the way, there's going to be disappointments. We're always going to be, there's always a possibility of sickness. We're certainly going to age. If we're fortunate, we're going to age for a while. And every one of us is going to die. But we create strategies to ignore that, don't we? One of the most important things about understanding aging and death is that we have a finite time on this planet, which means we have a finite time to awaken. And if we really understand aging and death, we'll take the Buddha would often put it this way, and so I do too. We'll take to the Dhamma like our hair's on fire. There's no time like right now to awaken. And we don't know. There's a great sutta called the Bahia Sutta. And Bahia comes up to the Buddha and please tell me how to awaken. I don't know how much time I have. I don't know how much time you'll be here. Buddha, tell me. And the Buddha was on his arms around. He says, I'm busy right now. I can't tell you right now. Bahia said, again, I don't know how much time I have. Teach me the Dhamma. The Buddha says, I'm busy. I'm on my arms around. One more time. Bahia said, please teach me the Dhamma. I don't know how much time I have. I don't know how much time you have. And the Buddha gave Bahia a very brief explanation of the Dhamma framed by mindfulness. And Bahia awakened. A short while later, Bahia was walking down the street and a cow trampled him and killed him. He was right. A lot of people laugh when I get to that point where Bahia was trampled. The point is that Bahia was right. None of us know how much time we have. The most important thing we can do is to awaken, isn't it? It's much more important than any other things that we think we have to do. So that points to another factor of the Eightfold Path that I'll touch on in a minute. So dukkha occurs. Another way the Buddha described that is that not getting what we want is stressful, it's suffering. Then he said getting what we don't want is dukkha. It's stressful, it's suffering, it's disappointing, isn't it? And again, why did it take an awakened human being to point that out, to make it a noble truth? Because we want to ignore that. And we create all kinds of strategies why we need things to make us happy and why we need to avoid things that we can't avoid to keep us happy. That's all part of conditioned thinking. We start creating identities, self-referential identities about what we like and what we need to keep away from. Is that clear? Does that make sense to everyone? We all do it, don't we? We all create a life and a self-referential self that says, this is who I am. I need these certain things to be happy. I cannot have any of these things if I'm going to be happy. And we spend our whole life chasing after what we think we need to be happy and safe and secure, and doing anything we can to avoid anything that we think might bring us unhappiness or an unsatisfactory experience. That's the ongoing distraction of a life rooted in wrong views, rooted in ignorant views. Again, this is what this brilliant human being figured out. It seems almost too simplistic, doesn't it? Except if we look at ourselves closely, we realize that that's how we live our life, chasing these things. And everything that we chase, everything that we attach ourselves to, everything we need to be happy and secure and safe, one of those things is impermanent. This refers to that thing about the second part of meditation, the insight part. What we're learning is to gain insight into the impermanent nature of all things, the impermanent nature of our self-referential views, and our wrong views in relation to that impermanence and what we're attaching ourselves to. Those two things are called anicca or anatta, impermanence or the not self-characteristic. And the three marks of existence are impermanence, the not self-characteristic, and the resulting dukkha. It's those three things, that little package, that we're here to gain understanding of, insight to. And when we can gain understanding of that, just like the Buddha, our minds will clear. So the first noble truth is that dukkha occurs. The Buddha concludes that description of dukkha by saying, in short, the five clinging aggregates are dukkha. Five clinging aggregates are form, feeling, perceptions, mental fabrications, and consciousness. And that's consciousness with a small c, not a grand cosmic consciousness. It's consciousness in this sense is ongoing thinking rooted in that initial ignorance. So these five aggregates, and again, it's an unfamiliar term, so just because it's an unfamiliar term, we have a hard time just understanding it. Most of us do. I did for quite a while. It simply describes the ongoing personal experience of suffering. The first one is form. We identify ourselves with physical form. And we relate this physical form to the rest of the physical form, all the physical phenomena that's arising. And in a subtle and sometimes not so subtle way, that relationship to other forms is self-referential. In other words, we look at things and, I really don't like purple zafus. I like black ones. Inconsequential and kind of silly, but it's self-identification. And if the room had to be filled with purple zafus, I'd have a very hard time meditating, wouldn't I? Because of that self-referential view. Again, I'm using a silly explanation for what we do with everything. Because of self-referential views, we see ourselves in everything. Everything becomes a self-referential object that we attach ourselves to. So now you can see how our heads start spinning, don't they? All of us. Because everything we see is in relation to, do I like it or do I not like it? Or the most common experience is we're indifferent to it. But that indifference is a form of distraction too that causes us to miss most of our life because we're indifferent to most of what's occurring because of those self-referential views. Five clinging aggregates simply describe the personal experience of ongoing dukkha. The second noble truth is craving originates and clinging perpetuates dukkha. So if you think I need a life that's full of black pillows and not purple pillows, that's craving. Craving, initially, that's establishing a self that needs black pillows and not purple pillows in its life. That's the initial craving. A little bit more subtle way of explaining that is it's craving for a self-referential existence, for having the world be the way that I want it, which is another way of saying I'm creating now a personal experience where nothing is personal. Craving originates and clinging perpetuates suffering. So now that I've decided that it's only black pillows that are going to make me happy, now I'm starting to attach myself to it. I'm clinging to that notion because I've made an identity out of it. Can you see how that's going to create a lot of stress in my life? Because not all pillows are black. Not all people are the same. Not all jobs are the same. Not all cars are the same. Not all cake is the same. Not all fruit is the same. On and on and on and on. As soon as we start craving for and clinging to anything specific, we're setting ourselves up for stress and disappointment. And we do that in infinite ways. So I'm sure that some of you at least are thinking, well, don't I get to have any preferences in life? Yes. In fact, it's important that we decide what is most skillful for us to engage in. I think it was Tim you were asking me about eating healthy. That's an important thing to do. But when we start insisting that our life be a certain way, that we only have brown rice and never see white rice, we're setting ourselves up. So it's important to make skillful decisions, but it only creates disappointment and suffering and distraction when we insist on something being a certain way. It's two different things. And as we develop the Dhamma, we realize the very significant difference between acceptance and approval. We accept things because it's what's occurring, but we don't have to approve of anything. We can get past that notion. And life becomes infinitely more meaningful when we can simply be present with what's occurring. And then everything does have meaning because we're not rejecting anything and we're not needing anything. And when we have a piece of chocolate cake, we can enjoy it. And when we're lucky enough to get a black pillow, we can sit on that in peace, but we're also able to sit on a purple pillow if it's the only one around. Am I being a little bit too silly with my explanations, or am I making sense? Okay. Because it really does get to that ridiculously mundane level, our choices, our decisions, our self-referential views. And of course, you can take it to the highest level and to the most significant events. Craving originates, clinging perpetuates suffering. That's the second noble truth. Again, when you look at it clearly, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Again, it took an awakened human being to realize this, and now he's not finished, because the entire context is what's important. Because now he's only described that there's an underlying unsatisfactory nature that is prone to confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing suffering. And he's told us the reason why. Much like a doctor said, you smoke too much, you got some problems with your lungs. The problem is that we crave for a self-referential existence, and we cling to those identities that we make. The third noble truth, they're all important, but probably the most important one, is that cessation of that process is possible. Cessation of suffering is possible. And that points directly to one of those three marks of existence, impermanence. If impermanence wasn't a characteristic of the phenomenal world, then we'd be stuck in this, wouldn't we? This really would be permanent. But nothing is impermanent, especially our self-referential views rooted in ignorance. Cessation of dukkha is possible. Third noble truth. The fourth noble truth is that the path leading to the cessation of confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing suffering is the Eightfold Path. Four noble truths. The only thing that the Buddha ever taught was, I should say it this way, everything the Buddha taught, let me say it this way, let me go back a little bit. The Buddha would teach for 45 years. He started at 35, he passed away at 80. It's said that he gave over 84,000 discourses or teachings. That number is only, it's a number that just means a lot. Nobody really knows. But he did teach a lot. And those teachings were recorded, and that's an incredible story. It's on my website. I won't recount it now. It's also in my books. But because of the way that his teachings were preserved, we can know that they're what the Buddha taught. And it's really probably the most remarkable thing that I've ever come across in my lifetime, how that happened and that these teachings are still here 2,600 years ago. So the Eightfold Path is the only path that this awakened human being taught to end confusion, deluded thinking, and that ongoing unsatisfactory experience that we contribute to by our reactive conditioned minds. In other words, he taught this Eightfold Path to recognize and abandon ignorant views and develop wisdom where there was once ignorance. And he taught this for human beings to develop. We don't need any type of special gift, special merit. It's not bestowed on us by supreme beings or supreme Buddhas or anything else. The Buddha taught an Eightfold Path that through our own right efforts, any human being can awaken, develop that awakened mind of a Buddha, which in the description of that, the best description I can give, it's a fully mature human being, is an awakened human being. It's a fully mature human being that doesn't crave after anything. Like a little boy reaching for that chocolate bar. My mom used to hit me, get out of there. It's a fully mature human being that doesn't cling to things that it thinks it needs to be happy. It's just naturally happy. So the Eightfold Path begins, and it really ends with right view. Right view initially is the view that this makes a little sense what you're hearing tonight and what the Buddha had taught. That maybe I don't understand everything. I acknowledge that there is something seems to be missing. And I would say that every one of us came here because we felt that something was missing from our life. We didn't quite understand what was going on, or maybe we just didn't understand ourselves anymore. But we realized that we needed something else. That's the beginning of right view. And that leads to what the second noble truth described as a problem. Craving originates and clinging perpetuates suffering. The next factor of the Eightfold Path is right intention. So right intention is the intention to recognize and abandon craving and clinging. And notice the word recognize. There's no analysis. There's no digging into my problems and trying to figure out where they came from. Recognize and abandon craving and clinging. And that leads directly to the next three factors that are called the virtuous factors, or the moral and ethical factors of the Eightfold Path: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So by using these words, right implies that there's wrong. I could just as easily use skillful or unskillful, or appropriate or inappropriate, but right and wrong kind of gets right to the point. But not right and wrong in a strictly moral sense. More in a skillful sense. It's skillful to live life from right view. It's skillful to engage in right intention. It's skillful to practice right speech. So let me talk a little bit about that. Right speech is speech that is honest. It's harmless towards yourself and towards others. Right speech abandons things like gossip. And anything that would relate to idle chatter. And idle chatter means just talking to hear yourself go, to continue to establish yourself, and to further distraction. And boy, there's been a proliferation of idle chatter, hasn't there, in the last 20 years with Facebook and Twitter and all that. Again, I'm not condemning those things. I'm saying that we can use them too much to further our own distraction. Most of us certainly have done that in the past. So right speech is harmless speech, it's necessary speech, and it's free of any type of gossip. Right action follows in the same way. Our actions are free of harm towards anyone else, and also towards ourselves. And those two factors of right speech directed at ourselves and right action directed to ourselves really take on a profound level of understanding. Because it's really the self-talk that we're caught up in from our conditioned thinking that continues to sabotage our own life. The things that we say to ourselves are usually the first things that we recognize when we're looking at right speech and developing the Eightfold Path. Almost to a person, my students, and I have been teaching here for 8 years, and I have some online students, will tell me that it's really right speech that started giving them some insight into this thing called the not-self. And then we start looking at our actions. There's a little bit broader framework that I won't get into just for time's sake, but that's part of developing the Eightfold Path. Right livelihood is the next factor, and it follows in the same way. What we're doing to make a living and to secure ourselves, we do it from a moral and ethical standpoint. We remain harmless towards others and towards ourselves. Right effort is the sixth factor of the Eightfold Path, and that simply means that we engage. There needs to be a little bit of an effort put into our meditation practice. Gaining the benefits of meditation, we have to actually meditate. And we put some effort into gaining a broader understanding of the Eightfold Path in the Buddha's teachings. That's right effort. Very simple and practical teachings, isn't it? But it's included in this thing called a Noble Eightfold Path for a reason. The Buddha realized that we need to be reminded that if you really want to awaken, it's going to take some effort. It's going to take some directed and concerted effort. It's not all that hard, but it does take some effort. The next factor is right mindfulness, and this implies that there's such a thing as wrong mindfulness. Mindfulness means to hold in mind or to recollect, and we can hold in mind anything, can't we? We can hold in mind the need to have only black cushions. We can hold in mind the need to have a whole chocolate cake once a day. We can hold in mind bottles and bottles of vodka, or pounds and pounds of drugs, or rounds and rounds of golf, or hours and hours of, what is the show that I don't watch much TV, but hours and hours of our favorites. Law and Order comes to mind. Hours and hours of TV, hours and hours of anything.
Sports.
What's that?
Sports.
Sports. Yeah, hours and hours of the Yankees in the playoffs.
You're overstepping a little bit. Sorry.
We can hold in mind anything. So this new modern religion of mindfulness can be very damaging if we think that all that it means is to hold in mind. Even holding in mind so-called wholesome things can be ultimately proved to be a distraction, can it? So the Buddha teaches right mindfulness is holding in mind the principles of the Eightfold Path. That's the most important thing. And that's called refined mindfulness. We've refined our mindfulness to the point where we're holding in mind these principles of the Eightfold Path in order to awaken. And that leads to the eighth factor of the Eightfold Path, right meditation. And of course, using that word right means that there's such a thing as wrong meditation. You could look at it as skillful meditation and unskillful meditation. There's all types of meditation practices, and I've tried most of them, and I'm not putting down any of them. But my meditation practice didn't have a real meaning and real effect until I started practicing Shamatha-Vipassana meditation within the broader framework. So the Buddha taught meditation for one reason and one reason alone, to deepen concentration. Why is that? Because a well-concentrated mind will no longer be distracted by that ignorant mind that's rooted in chasing after things that give us pleasure, all the distractions associated with dukkha. It also takes a well-concentrated mind to support the refined mindfulness to hold in mind the other 7 factors of the Eightfold Path. A distracted mind can't do it. And there may be some human beings that are well-concentrated enough that they don't need to meditate to develop that. I've never met them. And unless you're pretty sure that you are, I would suggest you should meditate to find out. Because very quickly in meditation, you'll find, just like you did tonight, I'll talk to you a little bit about it, Emily and Olivia and Ali. As soon as you started becoming mindful of your breath, you realize that you're caught up in your thoughts again, correct? That's a common human problem. There's nothing wrong with it. Doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. It just points to the need for a right meditation method that will develop a well-concentrated mind. And so in meditation, you realize you're caught up in your thoughts again. Come back to the sensation of breathing. And that might have lasted a second or 2, 3, 4, and you were back up in your thoughts, telling yourself that story again, right? Come back to the sensation of breathing. And both of those components are a meditation practice. Meditation is not just being mindful of your breath for X number of minutes. Do that. But if you remember that meditation is for deepening concentration, every time you find that you're caught up in your thoughts again and come back to the sensation of breathing, you're deepening your concentration. And over time, the ability to hold in mind your breath will develop for longer periods of time, but it doesn't really matter. If you're meditating for 20 years and you're only able to be mindful of your breath for 3 minutes or 1 minute, and you're caught up in your thoughts and you come back to your breathing, you're deepening your concentration. So the qualification of being mindful of your breath for a period of time should be abandoned immediately. Because if you look at that closely, it's just how long can I be mindful of my breath? It's not important. What is important is to meditate. And what is important is to develop the broader framework of the Eightfold Path. Again, the Buddha taught this entire practice. It's a complete practice. It's not impossible to develop. In fact, I would say it's not that hard, except we have a lot of resistance to actually letting go of these self-referential views. And that will often come up on our meditation cushion. It comes up as boredom or doubt, or we get angry at ourselves or get angry at our practice. Sometimes we just get tired and we say, I'm too tired to sit quietly. Now think about that. What adult can't sit quietly for just a few minutes? Except we have an awful lot of resistance to that, don't we? That's something that's one of the things that Buddha taught called the 5 hindrances. So I think that's enough of an introduction. I hope I didn't give too much. But 1 second, please, Diane. All of this information is on my website, becoming-buddha.com. There's guided meditations that are linked on the top menu. You can start with, I have 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, and 45-minute guided meditations that we've just done tonight. And there's 2 other meditations called Metta before we finish. Diane, you had your hand up.
Yeah, when you talk about conditioned thinking and things that distract us, I've heard you also talk about all of those things as stories that we tell ourselves, conditioned stories over and over again. Gee, I'm stupid, I'm fat, I'm ugly, and all these stories, and nobody likes me, everybody hates me kind of stories and stuff. And the thing that I think has been really and truly effective for me is every time I find myself in a story in my mind and I take a breath, the story loses power over me. And my obsession with the story is lost. And what that power that I have given that story does to me is it undermines me and sabotages me and all this kind of stuff. And to remember, every time I take a breath in the middle of that story, I'm breaking the story up, and it's not going to control me. And it's like, that's one of the yummiest things I've gotten from the practice is that these others, I don't have to be the way I was, which is part of what brought me here in the first place. I didn't like who I was, and now I'm finding like without those stories, geez, there's somebody in here not that half, not half bad. And I think that's, I mean, I know that's what you're saying, but that's one of the benefits of taking that breath and interrupting the distractions.
Yep, that's the right word. Thank you. Interrupting. So on our meditation cushions, every time we come interrupting that conditioned thinking that keeps the story going. And we're training ourselves to be so that off our cushion, we're also having the benefit of that we're able to recognize now when we're caught up in our life and caught up in a reactive way from our conditioned mind, and we can stop it at any point. Initially, we might find that we're reacting like we always did, but we'll have the mindfulness to recognize that I'm reacting from a conditioned point of view. It's at that point that we can begin to change our reactive thinking, our conditioned thinking. And it takes a well-concentrated mind to allow ourselves to interrupt that ongoing conditioned thinking.
It doesn't mean the story disappears, but it becomes a narrative without power. Yeah. Which is cool.
And as long as you continue to give it power through ignorance, that story is what is running our lives. And that really is, this is maybe a little bit too subtle, but it's living the story that ends up with feeling like, why is my life so meaningless? And I know people that had everything in the world and felt like they had nothing. I know people that really had nothing and had a pretty meaningful life because they're living such a simple life. But when you're living in that story, you're living a false narrative of your own life. When you let go of the story and you're living with great meaning and purpose because you're actually living your life, everything changes. And so the normal disappointments, thing that used to maybe drive you a little crazy, no longer do because you're not attached to that. You're not living that story. You're not living from that wrong view of self. And all those things that you thought you needed to be happy and safe and secure, you no longer need. You have a calm and peaceful mind. When the Buddha described an awakened human being, he did it in completely practical terms, nothing mystical or magical or esoteric. He said an awakened human mind is calm and at peace. That mind is released or unbound from clinging. And then in relation to the Four Noble Truths, he says the initial right or profound right view, awakened right view, is a view that understands dukkha, understands stress and suffering, but at a very, very profound level. Understand it so deeply that it has abandoned its own contributions to stress and suffering. Any questions about this introduction? Did you find it helpful? I hope so. So Emily and also Claudia and Ali and all of you, I hope you're going to start a meditation practice. Start with I suggest you start with short periods of meditation, 3, 4, 5 minutes. And if you can do that twice a day, about 12 hours apart, very soon you'll have an effective meditation practice. And if you can do you live in the area? You can continue to join us. And that's the other thing. It's very important to be part of a group of meditators. We're very fortunate. I know it might sound a little self-serving until you get to meet the rest of the folks here. But we're very fortunate to have what's developed in Frenchtown, really a well-focused group of meditators. Again, everything I teach is in that broader framework. I send out a newsletter on Mondays and Thursdays describing what I'll be teaching with a link to the article on my website if you want to preview it, read it first. I mentioned there's some guided meditations you can download and listen to, and you can sign up for my newsletter. The most important thing, besides being part of a Sangha, is to be very gentle with yourself. Don't judge yourself harshly, and don't judge the practice or the method harshly. Things will come up that you'll probably want to blame yourself, think there's something wrong with you, or you can't do this. Let all of those things go and come back to the practice. And pretty soon you'll start letting go of all those self-referential views. Am I right about that? Okay, let's go around the room. See what you have to say. Good to see you, Tim.
Good to see you, John. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for asking.
Everybody? I've been coming here only for a little over 9 weeks, and it was very refreshing to hear this again.
Yeah.
And I recall the first time I heard it, and now, and the meditation, my meditation practice is going very well, and I will say that it is very important, at least for me, to have an outside meditation practice outside of the Sangha. When I come into the Sangha to meditate, it's more powerful. Don't know why. I don't really care to know why, but it is. When you're meditating solo on your own, it's harder. But I will say that my concentration is getting very good. And I'm very happy for that and grateful for that. And I'm a lot more peaceful and tranquil. And that's very important. And it's not something that happens overnight. It's more like a journey. It's not that I've extended mine to 7 minutes in the morning and 7 minutes in the evening. And I hope to go a little longer than that, because I find that it seems to get better. And listening to one thing that came to me, if I may share this, and we don't have to get into it, but when I was on my cushion, I think on Monday morning, towards the end of my meditation, I was thinking that during the time of Buddha and other philosophers, in their time, their lives, their society had a lot to do with, there were gods, and there was religions, and there was no concept of evolution, really. Whereas in our society now, we kind of have both, and amazingly was able to separate that, because if you really, when I think about it, everything that's happening is going against, if we were just animals without any consciousness, without any free will, we wouldn't have to worry about all those things. About it, dogs don't have that much dukkha. They don't have self-referential views. They don't care what they look like. We do that. So combating all those things goes against the evolutionary idea of survival, and that's a struggle. That's part of at least how I'm seeing it, and it helps. I'm not saying it's to make it negative, but it's really helpful to recognize that these are things that for some reason humans developed, and which are the Four Noble Truths, the dukkha in the world that surrounds us, and these self-referential views. If you were to strip everything away, there's reasons why we have them. We want to look good, so we can get a mate, so we can have babies. Okay, that's just that's evolutionary 101. But those things hurt us, if we don't think we look good. And so when I read the suttas, and the more I read them and I listen and read what Buddha's words are, they're very profound, and they seem simple, but it's difficult. But it really is helpful, when you're able to understand that. And so I'm grateful for the Sangha, because all the insights that people give during the class is very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. From the first time you heard this, I'm going to put you in Emily's shoes for a minute, to now, and now you're back in your shoes. It makes a little bit more sense. It took 9 weeks to make some sense out of this.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's going to make even more sense 9 weeks from now.
It takes a little while to understand this, and I probably give too much information at first, but I really want to at least paint a broad picture. That's something to grow to. Thank you, Mike. Good to see you tonight.
Good to see you, John. Grateful to be here. Thanks. It was a very enjoyable refresher for me to hear that all again in the same context like this. When I first started coming, I guess a year and a half ago, I don't know if you remember, I mentioned to you that I had chronic back pain for a while, and that I
was able to find a really good doctor who taught me to ignore the MRIs that showed herniated discs and spinal stenosis and everything, and taught me that it was tension and stress that was causing it without making me feel like I was a complete mental wreck. And I've had recurrences a couple times since I learned that. It's a difficult process. The pain will come back, and what usually happens is you kind of freak out, and it's like a domino effect. And your brain starts going, oh no, the pain is back. I'm not going to be able to do this. I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm going to be suffering all the time. And it really starts to pick up speed. And so about a week ago, I woke up with a tension knot in my back that was running down my legs, sciatic kind of thing. And I was really able to talk myself out of it so much more quickly than ever before. And I really think a lot of that has to do with coming here and the whole concept of impermanence. Yeah. Because I realized, okay, this is not anything that I have to be afraid of. It's not anything that's going to, cripple me or anything like that. It's just, this is my body reacting in a certain way to stressors going on in my life. And it's not always going to be here. And that I think was incredibly helpful. It was about, 3 days really. And, each day got a little bit better, and now it's gone. And I'm sitting here on the cushion for all this time. Whereas, that morning I got out of bed, I could barely walk.
Thank you for sharing that with us. That's a practical application of how this works. You were able to interrupt your conditioned reaction that would have just kept going on because you've developed a well-concentrated mind that was able to see what was going on. That's the refined mindfulness, and you're able to interrupt it. That's how it works. Glad it worked. But it does. This is again, excuse me for being flippant about it. This is why the Buddha taught what he taught. So we recognize what we're doing to ourselves, and we can stop it. It's just that simple. We can gain full human maturity and stop reacting to things like someone who is slightly immature.
Well, when the first time I had this and I saw this doctor, he's written some books. He's kind of famous. And I was so frustrated because I met people who read his book, and the first time they read it, their pain went away. They had a back pain for 20 years. They read a book and it immediately went away. And I'm like, why can't that happen to me? And I got frustrated with it. And that was just part of my personality, I realized. But again, as I've learned more and just been able to stop that and not, say, why am I not like that person? Why can't I be that way or whatever? And just accepting it and saying, okay, it's here now and it'll be gone.
Yeah. Even that thought is a self-referential thought. When we're comparing ourselves to other people. The Buddha's very first teaching was I didn't tell the whole story, did I? His very first teaching was to the 5 guys that he was wandering around with. And he taught the 4 Noble Truths in a very simple way, direct way. It's called the Dhamma Sutta. And one of the guys who heard this first teaching, his name was Kandana, got it. He understood it. And he declared that all conditioned things that arise are subject to cessation. And the Buddha said, you are now Anakandana, the one who understands. All he had to do was hear it once. But of course, he's been developing in certain ways for quite a while. Ananda, who was the Buddha's cousin and was with the Buddha for nearly every discourse the Buddha ever gave, did not awaken until a month after the Buddha passed. And there was a little bit of frustration in it because he wasn't invited to it was called the First Buddhist Council. And he was upset, and he decided, kind of like the Buddha, I'm going to sit here and meditate until I awaken, and I'm going to do it quickly. And he did. He awakened, with that strong intention. The point of what I just said is the time frame isn't important. But if we engage in right effort and realize the importance of this to ourselves, not to anybody else, to ourselves, we will engage in that ongoing right effort, and we'll put the time in on our cushion. What Tim described after 9 weeks meditating for 7 minutes is excellent. The advice that I give regarding time to most of my students is not to meditate for longer periods of time. It's usually you're going too far too fast, to cut back on it a little bit. So short periods of time and gradually, that's a pretty nice schedule. Some people go a little bit quicker and some people don't, but we got to be gentle with ourselves in that way too. Thank you, Mike. Kevin, good to see you.
Good to see you, John. I just want to echo the others in saying that was a really nice review. It's great to hear it. And it sounds very complex. It's simple, but there's a lot of detail to it.
Yeah.
So I think it's hard to take in when you first hear it. And I guess I've heard it, for a year now, and heard it a few times, and I always enjoy hearing it again.
Yeah.
It sort of puts everything in context. The whole at it.
Yeah.
So my meditation has been going very well.
Good.
And I'm looking forward to the retreat next week.
Yeah. Begins Thursday. So, and again, I had the same question I asked him. Your understanding of what I just said tonight is much
different.
Yeah.
From when I first did it. Yeah.
because you were able to develop the entire context of how
Right.
this fits.
Yeah, to hear the Dhamma and the teachings and putting a whole lot more context to it. And meditating.
Yeah, actually having the experience of this is, none of this is to be taken on faith, but as we have the experience of first deepening our concentration and then realizing experientially what right view, right intention, etc. is, it really changes everything. First, it's an intellectual concept, but then everything that Buddha taught is to be experienced. It's not to be taken on faith. There's no faith at all in this teachings.
You taught it, and I've read it elsewhere. The Buddha said, "Come and see for yourself."
Yep.
Ehipasiko.
That's what that means. Come and see for yourself, which means you have to experience this. It's not something that you can just be taught. You have to have it, have the experience of it. Thank you. I'll see you Thursday in New York. Allie, it's good to see you tonight. How is your meditation going? Do you have any questions about this?
No, I don't have much of a meditation practice on my own. I'm glad I brought myself out here a second time.
Yeah.
I've heard these teachings. I've been introduced to them before, but I sort of let things fall by the wayside. So it was a nice reintroduction to something familiar that I feel like let go of. So thank you.
Good. I'm so glad you're here. And again, just start with short periods of meditation. Don't tell yourself you got to start off with 20 or 30 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes twice a day, and you'll be right back into it. And I hope you can continue to join us too. Emily, welcome to our Sangha. What's your meditation tonight?
Well,
First?
I'm really happy to be here. I've been meaning to come here. I'm definitely going to come back.
Great.
But the thing with the cravings, can really identify with that, and the expectations
Yeah.
people put on things, and especially the way how things are supposed to be.
Yep.
You can really get caught up in that. But everything made a lot of sense. Very, very, very interesting. And I'm going to tell all my friends.
Great.
But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. I'm glad, and again,
I'm glad I
I
made it out.
hope you continue to join us. The meditation you did tonight, 20 minutes is a long time especially for the first time. But
Yeah.
In general, you were able to maintain the method. You were able to recognize when you were caught up in your thoughts, and you
Yes.
came back to your breath.
Yes.
That's
But
the
I didn't
basic.
even realize that I was back. Like the thought just disappeared, and I didn't even realize that it disappeared. And I was like, "Oh, the thought disappeared." And I was
Outstanding.
able to come back with.
Yeah, that's the basic practice. Now,
Yeah.
it takes continued practice, but again, short periods of meditation. If you can do that twice a day, around 12 hours apart, and then continue to join us. We have classes here Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday morning. So,
Okay.
Olivia, it's good to see you again. How was your meditation?
It was good.
Good.
This is definitely helping me with anxiety and anger.
Good.
When I try to practice coming back and focusing on my breath when I get really stressed out during the day and I want to explode. And it definitely is helping. It definitely really is helping. I really like letting go of what, normally I would hold to be truths that really, different concepts, like you were saying, that sabotage us and all. You were saying that the goal is to have like a higher concentration, like a better concentration.
Yep.
I was also
thinking similar things with that
Tim.
you were saying, Tim. Okay, where I was thinking, well, what about these things that are innate in us? You know, like things that we crave and stuff that they're like innate, innate. You know, so I guess with practice, we can maybe crave these things less, right? Like if we keep coming back and practicing, you know, these different cravings that we have that are like innate in us to reproduce and all these things, you know, are they supposed to get like less where we can control like feeling miserable about them because we're like conscious that we don't really need them to be happy?
Yes, it really is. It's a great question, Lindy, because it gets to the heart of the matter. There are certain things that we need as human beings to survive. We need food, we need shelter, we need clothing, we need medicine. Those things are almost provided for us. That doesn't mean we don't have to. We have to get a job or something to go out and get these things. Beyond that, it's best to start looking at the things that we really need to be happy and the things that we can let go of. But that does not mean that we live an ascetic life. That's an extreme view. So the Buddha taught an eightfold path that he called the middle way between those extreme views of complete sensory indulgence and complete deprivation. It allows us to be human beings as we continue to awaken. So we start where we are. There's nothing in the Dhamma or the Eightfold Path that says that you can't be who you are in this moment. But it does say to look at what you're doing. And if there's elements in there that are contributing to your own disappointment by craving and clinging, look at those and abandon the ones that you can in this moment. And as you deepen your practice, you're going to realize that you can be increasingly happy with increasingly less. Till eventually you'll get to the point where you realize your happiness isn't dependent on anything that you need to get or need to avoid. It does not mean, and your question is also very profound because it shows that you're starting to understand the implications of this, which can often feel like annihilation. What's going to happen to me when I don't want anything?
Yeah, okay.
What's going to happen to you when you don't want anything is you'll feel like you have everything. You don't need anything and you don't need to feel you need anything to be happy. But because right now you're clinging to things, it seems like annihilation. It seems like you're just going to die. And again, that's why the Buddha said, and I say, you have to experience it. And you can experience it. Don't listen to some crazy old guy in Frenchtown. He's just teaching this stuff. Experience it for yourself and go and be very gentle with yourself. In just a few short weeks, you deepen your concentration. That's remarkable. You've recognized that debilitating thing that human beings get caught up in, anger, and its gentler cousin, frustration, and how it's affecting your life. Most people live their whole life and never realize how hurtful anger is, or they don't even want to look at it. You're seeing it now. Good for you. Say over and over again, be gentle with yourself, give yourself time to develop, and you'll naturally let go of the things that are no longer serving you. But you don't have to give up everything all at once.
Yeah, you explained that really, really well.
Good.
One other thing
Sure.
is it's a little bittersweet. I mean, I found myself here at this point in my life that, I was holding on to things that I desperately thought I needed.
Okay.
The way I was thinking worked for a long time, but it's come to a complete halt where it's no longer working. I turned into a very miserable person. So I guess my question is it supposed to be bittersweet a little bit because, I'm trying to move into a different way of thinking so that I can be more peaceful each day. Mm-hmm. But what about like the self that I did have, like my identity that was, all these different things that made me who I was,
Yeah.
made me me.
So you're getting a very deep understanding of the nature of impermanence. Those things that you needed for so long and that you that was you for so long
Not really me.
is no longer here. And look at it even a little bit deeper. All those things you thought you needed and that person that you thought you were, a permanent Olivia, and the things that you did to defend, maintain and defend Olivia, they're like foam on the ocean. There's nothing there, is there? Why haven't put all the effort into it?
Beings, right?
Pardon me?
Like I'm more of like a loving being, right? Like is
You
that
naturally are.
practice?
Every human being is. When you start all those things that make us competitive and aggressive and defensive, what's underlying that is a loving and compassionate human beings. That's a natural way of being that most of us have a hard time continually expressing because we're trying to maintain and defend an ego self. We don't even like the fact often. I mean, there's people that are psychopaths that, and I'm using that in as clinical a term as I can. They really don't understand this, but most human beings act aggressively and competitively towards others because they're trying to maintain this thing they think they have to maintain, but they don't feel too good about it often, you know? And we get into this, I don't want to get into too much of a psychological thing here, but we get into this vicious cycle now. So you've developed a way of recognizing and abandoning an Olivia that no longer worked for you. And that Olivia that you were living for all those years, I don't know how old you are, maybe 25 or 30, I don't know. You're not supposed to talk about a woman's age, so I'm not. Here. You have a memory of it, you had an experience, you've had a lifetime of it. But in this moment right now, there's nothing there, is there? So what you're developing is the understanding, and really gets to the heart of the matter, that there is no such thing as a fixed permanent self that we can ever cling to. But it does not mean that there's no such thing as a self. So this thing that is having the experience right here in this room for all of us shows that we are in a continual process of becoming. The significance of that is if what we're becoming in this moment is still rooted in ignorance, what we can only hope to become is someone continually experiencing that ignorance. If what we are in this moment is developing the broader framework of the Eightfold Path, then we have the potential in this moment to become awakened. And then each moment has a meaning towards that awakening. And that's another teaching on the importance of maintaining mindfulness of the Eightfold Path. So the bittersweet experience that you're having, have that and be at peace with that quality of mind, but understand that even that experience, that feeling, if I'll put that word on it, is impermanent. Meaning that there's nothing to hold on to, it's only there to be experienced.
What if it returns? Do I tell myself again that like it's impermanent?
Yeah, it always is.
You have the returning.
Yep. And I would say, I'm not guaranteeing this, but it likely will simply because of conditioned or habitual thinking. And as we develop this path, as we start looking at our identities, recognizing some and abandoning them, just because of conditioned thinking, we'll often act in the same way. Even that, we shouldn't get frustrated. Simply recognize what is skillful to abandon and what is part of the Dhamma that we move toward. Again, be very gentle with yourself. If you continue with the practice, you will awaken, meaning you'll gain full human maturity. And you'll do it in this lifetime. And you may do it tomorrow. It may take you a little bit more than tomorrow. But great questions. I can tell by your questions. One of the reasons why I do go around the room is so I can get this feel from people's questions. I can tell if they're really developing an understanding, and I can tell that you all are. So, good for you.
Thank you. You really explained that really well.
Great, thank you, Diane. Good to see you tonight.
It's really good to be here. Every time you take a breath in the middle of one of those bittersweet experiences, you interrupt. with a conscious breath, you interrupt the thought and a little bit more, and you chisel away, and you chisel away. And it's just so kind of cool, the experience. But I'm not done having those bitter experiences. And I don't like them. I really wish they wouldn't come, and I've even talked to people who had meditated for a long time and then they quit because they just didn't want those maturing experiences. Part of what that is feeling the feelings that we neglected to feel way back when, or when an event occurred. And now meditation brings those up. I heard before I started meditating that the answers are inside of me, and I would get so frustrated because I look inside of me, try to inward look, and not, I didn't find anything. And but through meditation, I'm finding the answers, and it's what is it mystical, or is it?
No.
No. Wait up. Don't judge me until I finish my thought. The whole ego thing of all these stories that I concocted because, my mother did this, or my brother did that, or my father did this, and my friend did that, and all of these stories that, ego had built up to keep me surviving. And as I go through meditation, each of those stories, comes up, and I breathe, and then they go away a little bit. Mystic feels, like, wow, this is really cool. And how come the world doesn't know this kind of thing? But staying with it, I think what I learned to do early on in my life was abandon myself. I just gave away my authority and my power to anybody, who was dominating me. And that, came to a point where it didn't work anymore. And that is a intricately woven part of my life. It happens at all kinds of levels. And through the practice of meditation and experiencing each of those times that I gave away my power, that I abandoned myself. This is what I was trying to say. It's like I'm finding out who I am, and I'm not. I am not. And that's part of the no self. It's just, that's the mystic, what I'm calling mystical or mysterious or something like that. I don't quite understand it, that I can, with my ego mind, put a handle on it or anything like that, but I'm really okay with it. It just feels good. And it is so it's like I had a low self-worth and low self-esteem. And for women, a lot of women, especially my age, that was what we were raised with. So we were second-class citizens, our mothers just got the right to vote and all that kind of stuff. But what this whole process teaches me is I'm worth something. And I didn't know that. I did not know that. And I'm worth staying with. I'm worth sticking to. I'm worth not abandoning. I'm worth sitting on my cushion for 7 minutes or 2 minutes a day or 20 minutes or whatever. I'm worth it. And it gives a value and a dignity that I never knew before. And yet, it doesn't give me what I thought it was going to give me, the big something. It's just a right feeling. And I'm just really thankful for John for teaching it and for continuing having classes. And I'm grateful that I'm finding out that I'm worth some time to spend with myself. Is that okay? Did I say it?
That's very good. Thank you, Diane. Yeah, we as we develop a realistic view of who we are, all those false views fall away, and we realize the true value that we have, and that true value is in taking this opportunity to awaken. Even the Dalai Lama, I got to qualify that with saying I don't believe everything the Dalai Lama says is correct. That being said, he said something that is very important to understand. The purpose of time is to awaken. Why we're here. There's all kinds of things that are important to us just to maintain who we are in this world. We all got to go to work and do all those other things. But the most important thing, the overarching experience of life should be awakening, shouldn't it? And to me, the most remarkable thing in my life is that the teachings of an awakened human being are still here. They're still available. And I have a mind that can develop this. And not that I have an extraordinary mind. I don't. It's an ordinary mind. It's a human mind that the Buddha taught to that type of mind, like we all have, to awaken. So that's tonight's class. Is there any other questions about this? About how to establish the practice? So for the newer folks, I talked about a lot of stuff, and 2 of you have heard that twice now. Understand that it takes a while to develop this, but it doesn't take forever either. You know, there's some concepts you heard, like the 5 clinging aggregates. I'm sure that doesn't have any meaning to you, but it will over time. And even the description of the Buddha's awakening and dependent origination, I gave a very, very brief explanation of that. It takes a little bit of time, but all of these things are on the website. For people that are new, I would say start at the link that says for new visitors. Continue to come to class, and hope to see you all again. We finish every class with Metta, some variation of it. Tonight we'll use the Buddha's words on Metta. Metta means goodwill and love and kindness. And it's also a very good practice, an intentional meditation to use if you're having difficulty meditating because of harsh feelings towards others or towards yourself. There's recordings of Metta on the website too, and you could listen to this first, meditate on those, on Metta, and then engage in your regular practice too. Find your relaxed meditative posture, and gently close your eyes and gently close your mouths. And again, take a moment to become aware of the sensation of breathing in your body, and let that mindfulness of your breath cease any distracting thoughts to the past or to the future, or that may have arisen from our talk today. And these are the Buddha's words on Metta from the Karaniya Metta Sutta. This is what should be done by one who is skilled in goodness and who knows the path of peace. Let them be able and upright, straightforward and gentle in speech, humble and not conceited, contented and easily satisfied, unburdened with duties and frugal in their ways, peaceful and calm and wise and skillful, not proud or demanding in nature. Let them not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. In gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, the great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and the unseen, those living near and far away, those born and to be born, may all beings be at ease. Let none deceive another or despise any being in any state. Let none through anger or ill will wish harm upon another. Even as a mother protects with her life her child, her only child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings. Radiating kindness over the entire world, spreading upwards to the skies and downwards to the depths, outwards and unbounded, freed from hatred and ill will. Whether standing or walking, seated or lying down, free from drowsiness, one should sustain this recollection. This is said to be the sublime abiding. By not holding to fixed views, the pure-hearted one, having clarity of vision, being freed from all sense desires, is not born again into this world. Thank you all for a wonderful class. Peace. Just a couple of quick announcements I forgot. Our retreat begins this Thursday, the 19th. There's still a few beds left if anybody wants to come, but there will not be a class here Thursday or Saturday this week because we will be on retreat. But you can join us Wait, I'm talking about next week. What's today?
This
Yeah.
Today's Thursday.
Yeah, a week, next Thursday's class and next Saturday's class we won't have, but you can join us next Tuesday. But our retreat starts next Thursday. And our Donna dinner, this will be our 7th, is November 21st at Love and Oven. It's a community dinner open to everyone, a free dinner. There's info on the website, but it's really just a wonderful evening for all of us. I'll be talking more about that between now and then too. So thank you all for joining tonight. Peace.